Good evening to our 200. Thank you. Good evening to our 280,000 bosses from Sengkang, Pongo, and Jalan Kayu SMC. The past few years have not been an easy time for Singaporeans. We watch as prices surge on things that we eat, use, and depend on. Char kway teow, keh ham, used to be $3, but it's now $4 or $5. A full tank is now $100 or more. So riding the bus or taking a taxi is more expensive. Bills from the electricity company, the tutor, the doctor are all up. Good luck finding your own place or upgrading with million-dollar HDB flats. What has the PAP done to help you cope with this rising cost of living? It is now a standard playbook. They give out ever more vouchers. More SG60 vouchers, CDC vouchers, GST vouchers, USAVE vouchers. For companies, it's also more of the same. More tax breaks, more tax relief. Many Singaporeans rightly judge that such measures are short-term, address only the symptoms, and hence deeply unsatisfactory. We would rather lift ourselves up than to feel patronized and dependent on the system where we need handouts. These may be necessary in emergencies like COVID-19, but a continued dependence on them suggests a problem with the system itself. Reducing the burden of regulation and taxes is surely welcome, especially for struggling small businesses. But to keep coddling rich multinationals cheapens our country's value proposition. What is worse, the government has only added fuel to the flame of rising costs. They insisted on raising GST in 2023 when inflation was already raging and when there were easily other sources of revenue available. They've been slow to release more vehicle quotas, even in a low-volume year, thereby allowing COE prices to escalate to as much as $150,000. And they're stubbornly stuck to a land pricing formula that embeds the price of land into public housing valuations, effectively passing on the potential bubble in land prices onto resale HDB flats. But the PAP seems to have no better ideas on how to address these problems other than more handouts and more vouchers. High cost of living aren't just because the world at large has experienced post-pandemic inflation. High cost of living in Singapore are as much a homemade structural problem, demanding structural solutions since they were manufactured by the PAP. Think about HDB. Conceived in good faith, it served our nation's housing needs for more than a century. But owning our homes is now a juggling act, a balance between affordable housing, enough returns for retirement, and having a roof over our heads. Like any juggling act, however, these balls will eventually come crashing down. These competing goals are fundamentally irreconcilable, and the way the government has tried to square this circle has been to give ever greater grants and subsidies to new homeowners. But this fosters a rentier mindset. People buy and flip, cashing out after the MOP. Yet speculation breeds more speculation, since sellers know that the government will make up the shortfall. The MND budget gets redder and redder. But apparently, this is prudent policy, whereas pricing land less is raiding the reserves. And high land valuations don't just affect the prices of our homes. Costly land means high rents. and high rents are killing our companies. The government says that rents are only a small part of business costs, but they do not affect food prices. But they fail to see that rent gets passed through to everything else without acknowledging that their land policy is a problem. How can the PAP solve a problem of high cost of living? Now that prices are already high, the only way we can all cope with the rising cost of living is to have our incomes rise. We will then worry less if our salaries have adjusted accordingly. But the government has been too passive in urging businesses to embrace this sorely needed adjustment. They've worked with the National Wages Council to issue guidelines for raising salaries, but only for lower wage workers. Yet the rest of us face high prices too. And for the retired, they have stubbornly refused to adjust how CPF pays interest, even as retirees' hard-earned nest eggs are eaten up. This government needs to take stronger leadership on the economy and make sure that the overdue increase in our incomes comes sooner rather than later. The decades and decades of parliamentary supermajority that the PAP has enjoyed has bred policy complacency, intellectual stagnation, and unimaginative thinking. This is no longer your father and my grandfather's PAP. The modern PAP has shown itself bereft of good ideas and necessary reforms that are able to address the complex and evolving problems of the 21st century. Now, the PAP calls for unity. The Workers' Party believes in a united Singapore. But we cannot, we must not blindly unite in voting for the PAP. If we did, we will be trapped with the same old ideas and lack of diversity needed for problems that demand permanent structural solutions. Some have suggested that the PAP is trying to conjure up the politics of fear to scare voters into choosing a safe harbor in turbulent times. But my fear is more a parliament dominated by only one way of thinking and looking at the world, which will only mean disaster for the future of our country. How can we be sure that a one-party government will take your concerns seriously if we aren't there to speak truth to power? How can we be certain that highly paid ministers are not subject to groupthink and disconnected from the things that truly matter on the ground to you and I? How do we know that there will be a future for ourselves and our children when Singaporeans are not choking under the pressure of high prices and high costs? We need fresh ideas and new perspectives for our changed world. The Workers' Party has consistently championed innovative policy proposals in Parliament. The PAP dismisses our arguments, calling them theoretical or irrelevant. But then 10 or 20 years later, they show up in government policy. Let us be your voices that the government can no longer choose to ignore. Voices that know how you feel because we talk to you. We listen and we learn. Voices that empathize with your struggles because we feel them too. Voices that don't just go with what this government wants, but what the people you want. These are the voices of the people and the Workers' Party, working for you, working for Singapore.